Which Auburn Tiger has the most to gain from summer workouts?
Freezing temperatures are likely for several hours inland and a few hours closer to the coast.
Yes.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. The everydayers know him as the man, the myth, legend, Darrell Dapprich. Also, Dr. Chow's number one patient joining us on this Wednesday. And Darrell, there's so many guys on this roster that have a chance to take a big step forward for different reasons over these next few months before they get into fall camp. So on today's show, we discuss the 5 players on Auburn's roster that have the most to gain during summer workouts. I think there's different ways you can take this as far as position battles, as far as being, a later arrival to campus, because this second transfer window was a big one for the Auburn Tigers. But I think we're both going to start at the same place here. Payton Thorne, the guy who we both project to be Auburn's starting quarterback this season. Payton Thorne has the most to gain of all the Auburn Tigers on the roster over summer workouts.
Absolutely. And he's also got the most ground to make up, not because he's not as ready, maybe as some other portal transfer kids coming in, but inherently the quarterback position is where you have to make up the most ground. You have to develop a rapport with your receivers. You have to understand the routes. You have to work with the quarterback's coach, the plays, all that stuff. From a quarterback position, you always have the most to make up, especially when you weren't on campus in the spring. Yeah. So I think he's smart enough, son of a coach. He's played in the Big Ten. So I think just getting reps under his belt, just being around guys, we know he's throwing with people right in the offseason, getting with some receivers for a little side, informal throwing sessions. Just that in itself and him getting reps and getting around Phil Montgomery, getting around Hugh Freeze, being around his receivers is why I think he has the most to gain.
Yeah, I'm with you. And, he came on this show last week, and something that stood out to me, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said he didn't want to pass somebody in the hallway and not know their name. And, I think the leadership style that he wants to have as a successful quarterback, I think he's also got a lot to gain in the sense of he's got a lot of dudes to win over, but he's got a full roster and a full coaching staff and a full, slate of, support staff members. I mean, there's a lot of people that work in that big old building over there, and he's got to win them all over, right? And so I think he's got a lot to gain. And you mentioned him throwing to receivers and working with running backs, and I'm sure he's communicating a ton with the offensive linemen about protections, this, that, and the other. So I'm with you. I think that's a very clear one that Payton Thorne has the most to gain this summer. And look, he's got a little bit of a runway even after the season starts, assuming he is named starter. He's got to beat out Robbie Ashford, sure. But, UMass, like that is a winnable game. It's not really until you go to Cal where you're like, okay, this is really where, I'm starting to kind of jump into some hot water here.
I think there's an underrated value, too, that you mentioned that I think is lost in all this. We're assuming we're talking about on the field, but in the quarterback position and a guy like Payton Thorne, you touch on something that doesn't need to be overlooked, and that is the relationship building aspect. He's supposed to be the leader, right, as the quarterback, command the huddle. So he also has to earn that, and he has the most to gain with building relationships with these guys, not just his receivers. You got offensive linemen, you got running backs. All that has to happen where he's got to gain trust. So gaining trust means also, in my opinion, you have the most to gain.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. All right, the guy that's second on my list as far as guys where they have the most to gain over summer workouts, and this really could be one of two guys. But I'm going to put Shane Hooks down there, the former Jackson State wide receiver, just because he's so big and he checks all the boxes that Hugh Freeze wants in a wide receiver, size, athleticism, ability to go get the football, can stretch the defense. There's so much to like about what he brings to his roster spot. And I think also just with the reps of working with quarterbacks, whether it's Payton Thorne, whether it's Robbie Ashford, whether it's Holden Geriner, whether it's baby goat Hank Brown, it doesn't matter. As many reps as he can possibly get, on that beautiful, sweet turf that's in the new Auburn facilities. He needs to be out there as much as stinking possible. So I think Shane Hooks, you just talk about his upside and his ability and potential to be a top receiver in a Hugh Freeze system, a Philip Montgomery system. He's got a lot to gain by getting things right this summer.
Yeah, that's a great point. I look at this a little different aspect of it. I look at who has the most to go, who has the furthest to go from point A to point B has the most to gain, because there's that gap there, right? I think Shane Hooks is already almost there. I think he's almost arrived. I'll talk about another receiver later on that why I think has the most to gain because of reps and injuries and that kind of thing. My number 2 is Kayin Lee, and I think it's because he comes in the spring, plays some in the A-Day game, and gets his feet wet a little bit. But if this dude ends up being in the rotation consistently by, let's say, game 3, look how far he would have gone and how much he would have gained by summer workouts and starting to progress. Because I think he's only going to get better. And some of these kids, all they need is reps to get better. They're naturally talented. They have the ability. They have all that makeup. All they need is experience. Where do you get? What's the first step to getting experience? Summer workouts. Then you go to fall camp. So I think he has the ability to make that leap from part-time player at A-Day to, he may even start some. He's on the field consistently at the cornerback position. He's got a lot to gain, and he can make that up by starting in the summer.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see how they use all 3 of the main corners. I mean, DJ James is exceptional. Nehemiah Pritchett is certainly battle-tested. I think he's a lot better than people think he is. And then Kayin Lee is special. I mean, he is special for what the amount of time he's been playing college football. I say it all the time. He's brought up his feet are just ridiculous. Like his footwork is just really, really good. So how do you put all 3 of those guys in there? Well, he's going to show them, right? And I think that's part of the stuff that's in the weight room, the physical aspect of it. Like, can he play nickel? I don't know. Like, can he be in the middle of the field? Is he physical enough to do that? Can he bump and run on the outside? We'll see. We'll certainly see. And that's stuff in the weight room that you got to work on.
Good point, too, is that there are certain positions that guys will benefit by just getting stronger. By working out in the summer and putting on weight and getting stronger, they take that leap. So they're going to gain that. They're going to benefit and have a lot to gain because they just got physically stronger, which may have been the only thing keeping them from starting or getting significant playing time was getting stronger and getting some weight on. And that happens in summer workouts. We've seen guys jump, right? 10, 15 pounds of muscle. You put on 10 or 15 pounds of muscle in summer workouts, you've gained a lot as far as closing that gap. So,
I'm with you. I'm with you on that. All right. One of my guys that's coming up next is a position group that you just kind of hinted at, the offensive line. And I don't think he's necessarily a starter, but he could be, Darrell. We discuss in just a moment right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show brought to you by our friends at Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs is the folks that they make the most comfortable pair of pants ever. In fact, last time Darrell saw me, I was wearing Bird Dogs. And Darrell, not to take words out of your mouth, but you thought I looked dang good, right?
I did. It's only second to your wife making that comment that enthusiastically. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. When you told me I looked good in my Bird Dogs, that was cool and all. But when my wife told me, different. Yep. And there was just something about like putting them on Father's Day where I'm like, man, like I am winning this day. Like I am absolutely owning it. And you can too. All you have to do is go over to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. And when you do that, it automatically applies the deal for you to get a free Yeti style tumbler as well. It's very, very good. I took it to church with some coffee this past Sunday as well. So be sure to check out our friends. Once again, birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. You look good. You feel good. They've got that liner. And once you kind of start wearing stuff with liner in it, it's really, really hard to put on normal pants after that. So once again, go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you. Darrell Dapprich, our guest. The everydayers know him. The everydayers love him. My number 3 guy, when we're talking about players that have the most to gain over summer workouts, I'm going Jaden Muskrat. And the reason I didn't go with any of the other offensive linemen, I almost put Connor Lew here. But the reason is because he kind of got here a little late, Darrell. Like, it really seems like the tackle spots and the center spots are solidified, right? Like, we all believe Dylan Wade is the left tackle. We all believe Avery Jones is the center, and we all believe Gunnar Britton is the right tackle. And so it's really those guard spots where we're like, okay, can Connor Lew win one of those spots? It certainly seems like Jeremiah Wright is a favorite to win one of those spots. Tay Johnson seems like he's certainly in the running as well. Hugh Freeze really, really likes him. But then went out and got Jaden Muskrat. So what exactly does that look like? An older guy that's been battle tested and played a good bit at, I want to say Tulane is a joke, but he played at Tulsa under Philip Montgomery next to, or on the same line as Dylan Wade. So can he play one of these guard spots, or was he simply brought in to be a depth piece? And I'm sure he would not have chosen to come here if he wasn't sold. Like, hey, you can come in and win a starting job. You just got to come in and do that. And so you do that on the offensive line by getting bigger, better, faster, stronger. And that's what you work on over the summer.
Yeah, this is an example of a guy that can go from a depth piece to a starter, possibly, after summer workouts. And you talk about who can gain the most, who has the most to gain. You know, I'm a little bit, I don't know, probably embarrassed that I did not include an offensive lineman in my list at all. And the reason is I have this preconceived notion that everybody's locked in. Everybody's locked in. So in my mind,
who are your guards then? Who's locked in at guard?
I have Muskrat starting at guard with Jeremiah Wright, Jones at center, Britton and Wade.
So you don't have to. You have Tate Johnson and Connor Lew being left out.
Yeah. Yes.
Wow.
So that's why I'm kind of like. So I could say Connor Lew or Tate Johnson could gain the most because they could get in that. But in my mind, I have this preconceived notion that it's locked in. So if it's locked in, it's hard to get the most to gain. Now, I could be 100% wrong, probably will be. That's just an opinion or a perception that I have, a preconceived notion that it's locked in. So, you know, to gain, you have to go from depth piece to starter. And I don't know, you know, maybe Muskrat and Lew and Tate Johnson, there's the battle right there. Those three. And one of those three are going to have the most to gain after summer workouts. I just feel like it's a done deal. And again, I could be wrong. We'll see, but I feel like that ship's already sailed.
All right, who's the number 3 player on your list as far as guys with most to gain this summer?
Jyaire Shorter, receiver. And basically, it's what we talked about, like with hooks. You know, you want to separate yourself and go from maybe a guy that's a backup at one of the receiving positions to being a starter. But I think he has the most to gain because he couldn't stay on the field last year. There were some injury issues. So get healthy, stay healthy, get in summer workouts, get your body in shape where it needs to be to stay on the field. And with that freak athleticism and size, he has the most to gain if he stays healthy because he missed so much last year.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the arguments for him are very similar to Hooks, but Shorter's got the injury, like you said, and it sounds like that was the biggest thing that kind of delayed his commitment. Is they had to work him out, and sounds like Auburn's staff really, really looked at him, kind of put him through the physical to make sure that everything looked okay. And the fact that he was cleared, I think, is probably a good sign, Darrell. And so he's got the ability to put in the work this summer to kind of help elevate and hopefully limit that in the future. And, you know, I assume the facilities that Auburn has access to keeping players healthy is better than what they have in North Texas. I don't know. Like, I feel like at some point, like a trainer is a trainer, but you got to think the equipment and like science that they have access to is better. So hopefully
he might not have to play as many reps. You know, with the other receivers that have come on board.
Good point.
Hooks, that kind of, he may not have to take as many snaps. He can rotate, stay healthy, stay fresh.
Good point. Good point. Stay fresh, almost as fresh as Darrell Dapprich. You want to go ahead and jump into your number 4?
I do. I'm going to go with Keldrick Falk. Everything we've heard is just now he's moved positions. Haven't you heard that too? Gone from edge to like a defensive end position. So because of that, and because of the weight and the mass muscle he's putting on, he's going from a position to change where he can make up a lot of ground, and he has the most. Anytime you're changing positions, what do you need? Workouts and reps. And you also need to add size. So if during summer workouts he lifts like a madman and puts 10, 15 pounds of muscle on and gets rep after rep after rep at his new position, then he has a lot to gain to where he could probably slide into a starting role there.
Yeah, and something that really stood out in my conversation with Jason Jones that went up on yesterday's show, I asked him about Keldrick Falk, and he's like, he understands the only thing keeping him from the league is him. And I'm glad he got that as early as he did, because you got to think he's going to be compelled to work harder, which is exciting. My number 4 is a linebacker, Larry Nixon, because I think we believe Austin Keys is kind of the number 1 guy in the pecking order. We don't know that, but that just kind of seems what it looks like looking at the rotation, excuse me, looking at 8A and all that stuff. I think that second spot's a little open. And you can't look at that at the linebacker room and say, oh, like they needed more bodies. There's a lot of dudes playing linebacker right now. But they went out and got to do with 1 year less of eligibility. So I think to Larry Nixon, it's like, okay, come on. Like, we need you. We need you to come on and get this stuff done. So I think Larry Nixon's a guy that has a ton to gain this summer.
It's a great point, and I went back and forth between who my number 5 was and Larry Nixon, and it's based upon experience and already having been there and kind of arrived already, right? So how much do you, like, it goes back to that thing I talked about earlier on. How much further, if you have less room to go, if you have a less gap or gulf to kind of, get together, then I think you don't gain as much. I think if it's somebody that's not as established, I think Nixon is established. I think he's already proven it, albeit at a lower level than my number 5 guy with the same position group. But
go ahead and say your number 5 guy.
It's Austin Keys, and I think it's because it's potential. That tag potential's there. The athleticism's there. Change of scenery, getting to know your teammates. Nixon's already been there and already been established. Keys is trying to get there and establish himself as an everyday guy and a guy that takes a lot of snaps. So if he can do that, and didn't we feel like, too, him coming in, he was a little undersized. We felt like he was a little bit of an undersized linebacker. So maybe he has an opportunity to put on 5-10 pounds of muscle as well, and then he has a lot to gain.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I didn't put Keys in here. I put Nixon over Keys just because I think Keys is the dude. Like, I think he's already, I don't know if he's necessarily won it, but I think he's the favorite to win it right now. Nixon, he's got to come in and beat out Steiner, who they seem to like, Eugene Asante, who had a good second half of spring ball accounts, Demario Tolan, however they're going to use him. They got to hold off Cam Riley as well. So I just think there's a lot of dudes that he's got to kind of hop, and Keys has already hopped them all, I think. So that was my reasoning there. I understand your reasoning too, but my 5th guy's Kayin Lee for a same reason that you had him as your number 2 guy, I believe. I just think he's got a chance to, I honestly think he has a chance to hop Pritchett. And I think there's a real chance that Pritchett may have started in the 8A game because they didn't want him to transfer. Like, I really think
crazy, because everything I'm hearing preseason is Auburn has a chance to have 2 corners picked in the first round, in Pritchett and DJ James. So if Lee beats out Pritchett and Pritchett's a first rounder, obviously that may change first round status because you're not getting on the field with as many reps. But look how crazy deep that cornerback room becomes.
They have to find a way to play all 3 of them, like we mentioned a second ago. They've got to figure that out.
And then you got Keontae Scott too. I mean, who I love and I'm really high on. He's got the prototypical NFL body and can tackle like nobody's business. That could be a very, very deep, elite
I'm with you.
part of the Auburn football team. And then you just mentioning the linebackers. We did a show in the spring where we were like, what's the biggest positions of need? And linebacker was like number 2 for both of us because Auburn had addressed the offensive line problem at the time. Look, all the names you just went through that perhaps couldn't start, Auburn's got some depth now in the linebacker room too. They definitely addressed it.
Yeah, it's better than it was a year ago, for sure. Better than it was 6 months ago. All right, so just to recap, players that have the most to gain during summer workouts. I had Payton Thorne at 1, then Shane Hooks, Jaden Muskrat, Larry Nixon, and Kayin Lee. You had Payton Thorne, Kayin Lee, Jyaire Shorter, Keldrick Falk, and Austin Keys. Similar thought process for most players, which is cool. We just kind of went with different guys. All right. The Locked On Podcast Network hosts voted on the top fan bases in the SEC, and we may have a DAP rant coming up. We may have one. I don't know this, but I sent you the graphic, and you're like, oh, we can have fun with this.
Oh, I got a lot to talk about. Yeah.
We will have that fun in just a moment. Right here on Locked On Auburn. I want to encourage you to join the Locked On Auburn Discord. It is free. All you have to do is click the link in the episode description down below. Also, if you're interested in possibly writing about Auburn football this fall and even kind of in the summer leading up to it, reach out to me and the folks at Auburn Daily. And we're looking to bring on a few writers. So please reach out to us there if that's something you're interested in. All right, Darrell, we polled all of the Locked On hosts. And here's what we came up with when we asked everyone who are the top 5 fan bases in the SEC. The poll came back as LSU at 1, Georgia at 2, Auburn at 3, Alabama 4, and Arkansas at 5. Now, if you would have told me going into it, okay, the results, Auburn is the 3rd best fan base in the SEC, I think I would have been like, yeah, okay, that sounds about right. I could see how a poll would certainly do that, Darrell. But having LSU and Georgia ahead of them, I'm more okay with LSU. Georgia being ahead of Auburn is a joke.
Yeah, it is. Absolute joke. That's first of all, a couple things. Number one, the criteria is very interesting to me. Is it when you say top 5 fan base, is it passionate fan base? Is it loyal fan base? Meaning, are they front runners? And that's when I'll get to Georgia in a second. And I love talking about other schools because it endears themselves to me, right? I think that, and also you got to look across all sports. So is this just a football top 5 fan base poll, or because Kentucky basketball is as rabid as anything I've ever seen, but they're very apathetic when it comes to football. So let's talk about this. I agree with you. Georgia being 2 to me is a joke for what you just mentioned. Georgia comes across elitist. They come across a little bit of an arrogant fan base, but they're nowhere to be found when they suck. And I don't care. I mean, this is an item for debate. People can take shots at me. That's fine. I've lived here since 1989. Auburn, Alabama, LSU seems to ride through the tough times and still be very, very loyal and passionate, even when they're struggling. They're still a fever pitch. Georgia, to me, comes across a little bit as front runners. When they're winning national championships, they're in the crowd with dog collars on and barking like dogs. But I didn't see that in the late 80s when I moved here. In the Ray Goff years, it was apathetic. Alabama, Auburn, and even Tennessee. Look, you can talk about top 5 fan bases, but a fan base that is so passionate that throws golf balls at Lane Kiffin is passionate. They are loyal. They are all in. I'm not condoning that, but I'm saying that's how passionate they are about no matter what happens, no matter the dark, dark times they've gone through, Tennessee, they are still big orange through and through and passionate. So
yeah, Tennessee should be a top 5.
They should be top 5. I would take Arkansas out of that list. I know they do the pig call and all that, but here's why.
Arkansas people, though, love Arkansas.
They do, but I don't think a team that's only been in the league since 92 should trump a Tennessee or Florida who's an original member and has built a lifelong, traditional, passionate fan base. That's why I would. Arkansas is absolutely passionate, and they are a wonderful fan base. But I don't think they deserve to be in over Tennessee and Florida in the SEC, who's been here forever.
I just think when you look at it, I mean, LSU 1 is fine. Georgia is not a top 5 fan base, in my opinion. Auburn is in there. I don't think Alabama's there because when your coach has to kind of say, please stay in the stands when we're killing people, that's not a good fan base. Get out of here with that.
Yeah, I guess I look at that. I'm a little bit different in my perspective going back to the Tennessee analogy because I look at passion and craziness and rabidness, and that's why LSU's number 1.
Sure.
Because they'll light your van on fire if it's
Are you cool with LSU at 1?
I am, absolutely. I mean, you go to a baseball game, they are crazy. You go to a basketball game when Shaq and Chris Jackson were there, they are nuts. They carry that across. Look at their women's basketball team. I know they won the national championship, but even before they did in the regular season, when they were building something and Kim Mulkey was building something, they came out in droves. Same with Tennessee. When Pat Summitt was there, when you can cross different sports and have that same passionate fan base, I give you kudos. That's why I put Tennessee above Arkansas. I put Tennessee above Georgia. I mean, Georgia, other than football, they're baseball fans, they're apathetic, they're basketball fans, they're just not. So I like LSU 1. I think Auburn, Alabama are interchangeable, and I may be biased because geographically where we live. I'd put Tennessee there. And I would have a tie between Georgia and Florida at number 5. I really would.
I think the Florida fan base is better than the Georgia one. So I'm totally with you on the Florida Gators being there. So that was fun. We've got other top 5 things that the Locked On hosts have kind of put together. We'll kind of slowly roll those out over the course of the next few weeks. So fun stuff. I want to do that one specifically with you, Darrell, because I knew you'd have a good opinion on that. Darrell, how can people check out everything you've got going on, buddy?
You can follow me on Twitter, DAP6410. You can catch me in the Locked On Auburn Discord. Love to interact. And then Monday morning, 7:10, Auburn Opelika this morning on WANI.
You can find all my written work at auburndaily.com. You can find some Brave stuff also at bravestoday.com. But until then, we'll see you tomorrow. This has been Locked On Auburn.